Hey guys, Technoman here with the video for you guys. In today's video, we're going to be comparing the iPhone 11 with the iPhone XR in a head-to-head comparison where we took a look at the hardware, the software, and the overall performance of these two phones in 2021, whether you're looking to upgrade from the iPhone XR to the iPhone 11 or in the market for either of these devices. You want to know all the differences that you need to know to make that decision. But before we go ahead and get started, if you guys are new to our channel, we do a lot of tech news, reviews, and giveaways. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. Also, if you guys are in the market for one of these phenomenal devices at a discounted price, make sure you guys check out the link in the description section where you guys can get these two phones at a discounted price instead of paying retail price. So let's talk about these two phones. The first thing we want to mention is the release date of these two phones. These two phones are not far apart in their release date. The iPhone XR here was released in 2018, and then a year later the iPhone 11 was released with the whole iPhone 11 lineup. And interestingly enough, between these two phones we see a lot of similarities when we took a look at the actual specs that Apple has released, and that's why this review is going to make kind of a lot of sense to you guys watching it, because you'll notice the differences between these two phones. Of course, one thing to mention between these two phones is that both of the phones actually come in variety of colors, unlike the flagship phones. These phones, we wouldn't really consider the flagship phones in a lot of ways because it's not the premium model lineup. These are sort of on the cheaper end that Apple has released. The iPhone XR here, sort of the cheaper version of the iPhone X lineup and the XS, where they start at $1,000, but the iPhone XR here started at $599 and the base model. Similarly, the same thing goes for the iPhone 11 lineup, unlike the 11 Pro and the 11 Pro Max, which starts at $10,999 and $1099. This is starting at $599, so almost $400 from the flagship premium that Apple releases these two phones. So these phones are sort of the cheaper option Apple has released, and the reason why Apple released it is that it saw that market for consumers that are looking for, quality phones but at a premium or discounted rate. This is where these two phones kind of come hand to hand. Things like, for example, the display between these two phones, if you take a look at it, they both have a 6.1 liquid retina HD display itself. Pretty much the displays are in a way pretty much the same. There's really no indicator to say that one display is better than another. Other thing to note in terms of actual phone, between just the physical difference between these two phones, you probably notice is that both of the phones, both front and back, of course, are glass, so you can do wireless charging. They're also made out of the same aluminum. This is aerospace grade aluminum, as you can see, that matte design aluminum body to it. Of course, physical differences you notice probably very obvious is the iPhone 11 with the dual 12 megapixel camera and having that Apple logo right in the center, but that word Apple logo, iPhone completely gone. iPhone XR here with the single 12 megapixel camera, and you have that Apple logo a little bit more shinier up more near the top. So that's the physical differences, probably where the camera front side pretty much the same. Both of the phones are water resistant. The iPhone 11 gets you 1 more meter up to 30 minutes, where the iPhone XR gets you 1 meter versus 2 meters between these two phones. But with any kind of all glass phones, you got to be careful, because if there's a crack or any sort of damage on these two phones, they're going to be water compromised, which you don't want because you can damage your phone. And let's talk about the next thing about these two phones is the actual chip on these two phones, which surprisingly, like Apple does, the iPhone XR here does have the A12 Bionic chip, and a year later Apple releases an updated chip, the A13 Bionic chip on the iPhone 11 here. So the 13, of course, is a little bit faster when it comes to gaming, things like that. If you're looking for it, if you're browsing, slightly advantage, or if you're doing a lot of multitasking, that's where the 11 beats the iPhone XR in that scenario. And let's talk about the battery life of these two phones, which is really interesting because both of the phones have very similar battery. If you look at battery, one thing you want to mention is the video playback. The iPhone XR here gets you around 16 hours of video playback. The iPhone 11 here gets you 17 hours. So 1 hour video playback differences. Does that really make much of a difference? We don't really think so. Between these two phones, both of them, if you're using a phone from somewhere between a medium, a little bit maybe to a heavy user, both of the phones will get you throughout the day. If you're doing basic calling, texting, things like that, you'll get through pretty much the whole day without really any sort of issues on these two phones. So good battery overall for both of these two phones. And let's move on to the camera, which is really important between these two phones. We know is between these two phones, of course, they have slightly different physical camera build. 2 versus 1, of course, the camera on the 11, because it has two, it's going to give you more of that optical zoom that we don't see here. As you can see, you're able to do optical zoom, which unfortunately on the iPhone 10R here, because it doesn't have that second telephotic camera, you're not able to zoom in and out. So you have regular. Of course, both of the phones does have portrait mode. You'll notice that on the iPhone 11, you get a lot more settings like the stage lighting and the high lighting, contour lighting, all of that. Where on the iPhone 10R, you only get 2 settings. As you can see, studio light and contour light. So that's one big difference between having 2 versus 1 camera. Other things to note about these two phones is that both of the phones are actually able to record similarly in terms of that the iPhone 11, of course, you have the zooming features that's not possible on the iPhone 10R, are able to record up to 4K at 60 frames per second. And talking about camera, we can't miss the fact the front-facing camera for your awesome selfies and FaceTiming. Between these two phones, the iPhone 11 has a 12 megapixel camera versus the iPhone 10R, which is a 7 megapixel. So a 5 megapixel jump between the 10R versus the iPhone 11. So that's another thing to note between these two phones. And now let's finally talk about another important aspect of these two phones is the software of these two phones. The software on both of the phones are actually, you're able to upgrade to the latest iOS 14 update. So that's a good news for both of these two phones. And one thing to note is that Apple generally supports most of their phones for about 4 to 5 years. So you won't have any issues. Both of the phones will get iOS 15 and 16 most likely. One thing to note is that the iPhone 10R, because it was released in 2018, we expect the major update to start between around 2024 when Apple probably starts dropping the iOS support. So you're probably going to get another 2 to 3 years of support on the iPhone 10R versus on the iPhone 11, which is probably going to get another 3 to 4 years of software updates. So a lot more for the software update. So purely on software update, the 11 probably makes a lot more sense to get if you're considering that. So why might you consider the iPhone 10R besides the fact that, it's an older phone and it has a lot of similarities between these two phones? Well, one thing why you might consider the iPhone 10R versus the 11 is the fact that if you're looking purely on for cost, if you're looking to buy these phones brand new, you're going to pay about $100 to $200 less for the iPhone 10R because it is a year-old phone. But if you're looking to buy, let's say, a pre-owned or a used device, the iPhone 10R, you can score for around $300 or so compared to the iPhone 11, which even if you buy it used is around $500 or so. So $200 to $250 saving in terms of cost. And of course, another thing to mention about the iPhone 10R here that's not possible on the iPhone 11 here is the microphone. One really small minor detail is that the iPhone 10R here has 3 mic versus 2 mic. Not sure why Apple decided to remove a mic, but it does have that. And one thing we haven't really discussed, although we mentioned between these two phones on video playback, they get around 16 hours versus 17, not much different. But purely on durability of the battery test, we saw the iPhone 10R actually outlast by 4 hours compared to the iPhone 11. So we saw 21 hour versus 17 hour in the durability test. So that's all it's going. It's probably more budget friendly with all the features pretty much you get on the 11. Besides, that software update, a year might not be as long as the iPhone 11, but still a great phone in 2021. And why might you get the iPhone 11 besides that it's 1 year newer than the iPhone 10R? Well, a couple of reasons. that we want to mention. It has almost 10% more faster, as you say, when you do some comparison tests all between these two phones compared to the iPhone XR. It also has 1 gig more of RAM, internal RAM. So iPhone XR has about 3 gigs versus 4 gigs on it. This is really important, especially for gaming. You're probably going to look to get the 11 for that reason, and solely for that reason, because of faster chip, more RAM, and other thing we mentioned before, as I said, the camera on the iPhone 11 is much better because of that true dual camera. You get things like night mode, which isn't even possible on the iPhone XR. You're able to do a lot more optical zoom, things like that. And of course, another last thing we want to mention between these two phones, of course, is faster download speed on the iPhone 11 compared to the iPhone XR that we've seen. So if you don't mind or can spend a little bit more to get the 11 between these two devices, we would say get the 11. It's going to be supported a lot longer, better camera, much faster speed in a lot of ways, and a more relevant phone and that unique design to it. But if you're more budget friendly, you probably go with the iPhone XR. And this is where it comes to fact, should you upgrade from the iPhone XR to the iPhone 11? And we would say don't do it. And the reason why is that because of so many of the similar features, from the display, the body size, battery, slightly better camera on the 11, but that doesn't really make too much difference from upgrading from one to another. But if you had the chance to pick between in either of these devices from an older phone like the iPhone 7, 8, or even older generation of the phone, go with the 11 here to get that more features, just a little bit more features than the iPhone XR. So there you go for our video review of these two phones in 2021. We want to hear from you guys. What do you guys think between these two devices? If you guys have upgraded from one to another, or currently using it, upgraded from these to another newer phone, what's your thought? Leave a comment in the comment section. Would love to hear from you guys. Thanks for watching, guys. And if you haven't done so, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button for future tips and tricks on your iPhones. See you guys next time.